Richier, representante de la Comisión Europea, que va a hacer la apertura. En principio estaba previsto que la apertura la hiciera el secretario de Estado de Telecomunicaciones y Sociedad de la Información, pero bueno, por un tema de agenda va a hacer la clausura al final de la mañana. Por lo tanto, corresponderá a nuestro primer ponente, que también voy a aprovechar ya para presentarlo, el señor André Richier, la realización de esta apertura. André Richier viene como representación de la Dirección General de Mercado Interior, Industria, Emprendimiento y Pequeña y Mediana Empresa, en la que se están desarrollando importantísimos proyectos en el ámbito de las tecnologías de la información y las comunicaciones, como son la mayor parte de la estrategia e-skills o los proyectos de e-competencies for professionalism que habrán seguro escuchado y que está ahora en proceso de normalización en la Organización Europea de Normalización, el CEN, y cuyo quizá los últimos logros serían la presentación del ICT Body of Knowledge, que se realizó en febrero, y la declaración de Riga, que fue precisamente el mes pasado, en marzo. I pass to leave you to the opening of this Congress to Mr. André Richier, and we begin after with the first presentation.
Perdón.
You can hear me? Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to present you the effort of the European Commission to promote ICT professionalism. Because as you know, ICT is currently not a regulated profession. There is still plenty of people who work as ICT practitioners who never got any degree in ICT. Depending on the country, it can be between 50 or 70%. So, which means that the demand has always been very high, and the supply has always been much lower than the demand, which means that a lot of people who could not find jobs, although they have degrees in mathematics, in engineering, or in biotechnology, or whatsoever, decide to work. There are also people who worked with a much lower level and still find opportunities for jobs. So we will see that this issue of maturing the ICT profession is becoming especially important is we see that IT now is increasingly pervasive. It's in all technologies. Now, if you look about a car, there is an awful lot of software and IT component in a car. And now there are even people who are worried that hackers can decide to steer the wheel against their decision and may provoke accident. And there is also this whole threat that data could be stolen from the driver and be used for whatever purpose, for commercial reason and whatsoever. So there is a real concern about the pervasiveness of IT and the risk that it may cause for society. And historically, in medicine, in law, in engineering, the professions were maturing where the risk perceived by society that was posed by this domain, these topics, need to have some kind of regulation, some kind of supervision. So we are not here talking about, of course, imposing any regulatory burden on the profession, but to think about a new possible governance, new possible ways of doing partnership to ensure that there is full responsibility being taken for making sure that the economy as a whole and the society at large is not suffering from poor project management, for poor delivery, and for all the threat that may come from cyber war and whatsoever. And we have to keep in mind that, of course, a lot of large enterprise in Europe can still recruit great talent in IT, but the biggest concern is with small and medium-sized enterprise, and also with the public sector, who has not necessarily the financial resource to attract the best talent. So this is a great problem, and the fact that, of course, this profession is still immature has an impact on the public perception. Most people believe that because the children can use Facebook and maybe a PowerPoint and Word, they are already digitally literate. They are not ready to take the job for the future. There is a big discrepancy in the public image. The other thing is that we will see that there is a big gap between the number of people entering ICT education and the need from industry. And what also is quite disturbing, and you've seen this mostly for public projects because they are scrutinized and it's generating scandals in the US, in the UK, in France, everywhere. There are big projects which are failing, and the order of magnitude sometimes is hundreds of millions of euros. So the cost for society are huge. So we have to improve the public perception. We have to facilitate and the access and boost the number of people entering this kind of education. We have to adapt also the education. And we have to act on this because the cost of project failure, the cost of IT failure may really be a big threat for society. So here this notion again of risk. We need to manage this risk. We cannot continue like that in a situation where so many people are working in this field without necessarily the good qualification and skills. If we look about the ICT workforce since 2000, and despite the burst of the dot-com bubble here that had an impact, dramatic impact in the number of people entering computer science studies, we see that there was a kind of plateau in terms of growth between 2001 and 2003, at the time when, of course, a lot of dot-com disappeared, and before that, there had been a very significant growth. So if you look here, we went from 2.7 to 3.2. And then after 2004, the growth resumed. And what is striking, what is very surprising, because most people would have expected that we would have the same kind of plateau, same kind of possible decrease when the financial crisis and the economic slowdown had appeared. This did not affect that much the growth of the IT workforce, because we saw that the workforce, even after 2008, will continue to grow. So this is especially true for what we call the core definition, and I will present this core definition in a minute. And when we look about what we call the broader definition, here what we see is that already in 2012 we were reached a peak, but in 2013 we saw a slight decrease. And this explains the fact that there are within the ICT workforce, the broad definition of the ICT workforce, there are big change happening. And these changes are due to automation and to innovation. And we will see, of course, the consequence that it has. And we will see that the different countries in Europe are not exposed to this threat, to this change, in the same way. And we will see in particular what the consequences are for Spain. So this is what I call the broad definition. So that brings together, and this is coming from the definition ISCO code, so occupation code, which have recently been changed in 2008, and that are used by Eurostat, so statistician body. This is the definition that comes from the highest level of skills and jobs, at the level of management, analysis, architecture, the core ICT practitioner part with software developers, etc., to the what we call the lower level of at technician level and ICT associate, practitioner associates. And the core definition that I was talking about, you remember the two different numbers. The core definition that has been used so far has been mostly the people who are really the IT workers working in IT department, mostly. And here you have, in Europe, 60% of these people who are working in outside the ICT sector. That means they are working for banks. They are working in a public sector in many fields. So 40% of the IT workforce is in the IT industry itself at large, 60% in IT using sectors. In Asia, it's the other way around. In Asia, you have over 60% of the workforce in the IT industry and 40% in IT using sector. That shows, of course, the importance of manufacturing in Asia, and also of development, typically in India, of basic software development for the IT sector. If you look at that, the US, where the IT sector is much more dynamic, as you know, than in Europe, you have almost 50-50. So Europe is mostly, the workforce is mostly for the sectors, the traditional sectors, like banking, like insurance, like manufacturing, in aeronautics, in many fields. So it's not the core IT sector as we see it. So we are in kind of already mostly affecting the transformation, the digital transformation of our industry. But at the same time, it signals the weakness of Europe in the IT sector itself. So, because when we look now, and you see the color, so unfortunately this color, this is purple, so this has been wrongly translated. If we look about the top level skills, we see that they are growing quite fast. So it's almost 30% between 2011 and 2013. The core group is here of software developers and the like is almost 4.5%. Those which are part, you remember this and this, these are part of the core definition of ICT practitioners. They are growing also at almost 7%. But at the same time, if we look these two groups, the yellow and the purple, we see that there is a very significant decline. So these are groups which are the most affected by innovation and by automation. So it's very important to keep in mind that, because we will see that in the distribution of the labor force by countries, the repartition and of the workforce is not the same. And in the future, of course, the trend will be that this group will continue to decline, while this group will continue to increase significantly, especially those which are here. So if we look now at some kind of average when it comes to here being the highest post type of jobs, and we position the countries, we'll see that on top you have Northern Europe, where you have the highest and most sophisticated type of jobs. So you see, so presently here, Finland, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Sweden, UK, Denmark, so Scandinavian country plus the UK. You have Belgium, you have Ireland, Germany, Estonia. Estonia is doing very well. And here, I mean, this is a story in a situation when we are talking about the crisis in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal. Estonia was really in big trouble some years ago, but they decided to make dramatic savings in most budget of the states. But there were two domains, two areas where they decided to increase investment and resource. This was education, and this was research and technology and IT. And there have been tremendous investment in the government, in the so-called e-government, which means that Estonia, which you may I think is a poor country and not doing so well because they had experienced communism for so many years, would still be lagging behind. But Estonia is really, when it comes to e-government, certainly one of the best practice in Europe. And that shows that political commitment, will, and strength has consequence, because they could still be very much at the bottom. If we look now about Spain, Spain is a little bit below the average, but France is just a little bit above the average, so it's not, the difference is not so big. Now if we look, and the color is almost the same. Now if we look about the number of workers, we see of course that an awful lot of workers are, because here this is 50,000 ICT workers, so each single image here. We see that of course most of the workforce is in the UK and is in Germany. France is following, and then Italy, and then Spain, and then Poland. But there is these numbers, but these numbers will change. And one of the things that our population have tremendous difficulty not to understand is the speed of change. Because as we see now here this will be the percentage. So the size of the circle will be representing the percentage of the ICT jobs within the total workforce. We see that in countries like the UK, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, we see that the percentage of people working in IT technology is quite big as a percentage of the workforce. Well, in Germany is not that much so big compared to France or compared to Spain, but it's interesting to see that the size of the percentage of IT workforce within the total workforce is quite big in some countries. And here you see I brought in some colors. So here you remember the group which are growing the most, so red, and blue mostly, and look about that. You see that there are countries like UK, which is almost 3/4 red and blue. So they are in the segment which are growing the most. If you look about Netherlands, it's even higher. If you look about Germany, it's relatively close. If you look about Luxembourg, of course, it's quite big. But if you look about France, it's not so big. Huh? If you look about Spain, they make, the red and blue make less than 50%. So which means that you still have, with the green and the purple here, a lot of people who are in the IT workforce who are on the threat of automation and innovation. So people that if they don't change, will find themselves where I was in the IT workforce, but now I'm unemployed. And then there are people here in my country, or in Europe, or in the US, or elsewhere, that say, well, the IT workforce is growing, we need IT practitioners. I am an IT practitioner. Yes, but unfortunately, you don't have the skills which are needed. So here, that's very important to understand this. And Italy, I would say that Italy is even in a worse situation. So let's look about just the countries which are representing 80% of the workforce in Europe. So namely UK, Netherlands, Germany, Poland, France, Italy, and Spain. You see that Italy is in a worse situation. Because that part is much bigger. I mean, they have a lot of people who are here, which for the next generation of IT system may well be jobless, many of them. Not tomorrow, but the trend is there. While when it comes to the top level of skills requirements, or the high level of qualification, they are still a little bit low. And that's a lot of consequence in terms of the way you communicate to the young people, and the way also the education system is delivering solution and is flexible enough to also take care of the people who are here in these segments, and people who will need to be retrained. These people will not go back to a university. So we need to find ways, partnership with the IT sector and IT training and online education to provide them with the skills that they need and to identify very clearly what kind of skills are very much needed. And because it is mostly in the IT using sectors, you need to establish very good relationship with these sectors to know exactly what they need, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises, which are big, especially in southern part of Europe. Okay, so that's just to show this level of dynamism. If we look about the tertiary graduate at EU 28, we saw that by 2006 we had reached a peak, because the decrease in the enrollment was quite massive in 2002, 2003. This was the time where there were articles in the Harvard Business Review, IT doesn't matter. And most young people say, well, IT doesn't matter, so why should I bother to learn it? I can use my Google, I can use Google, I can use Excel, so what? But now we pay the consequence, because the enrollment been stopping almost by that period, mean that, well, on the inertia of people who were already in the pipe, they graduated, but of course now we have this decline. And at the same time, when we have a growth in the demand, this is why we have this gap between the demand and the job which are growing, because just we don't have people to fill the jobs and to fill the potential. And if we look about the consequence are even bigger in the United Kingdom. Look at that. The United Kingdom reached a peak already in 2003. Well, it was in 2005. but then it kept declining. And now the situation is improving. The early figures which have been released show that as a whole now we had reached the bottom some years ago. Now we are slowly improving. But Spain, from the latest figures from 2012, was declining. Here you see. France was improved after the crisis, so people shifted. They saw that there were job opportunities, so they decided to go there. So what are our main forecast scenarios? So we have built 6 scenarios, and we have been working with stakeholders, and we asked them to identify which of the scenario they believe is the most realistic, the most reasonable. And in fact, the one that will bring the IT workforce by 2020 from 7.3 million to almost 9 million. But this is the demand potential, based on hypotheses, on growth, investment, and all that. Now, if we look about what we think will be the job that will be fulfilled, given the supply and given the capacity to absorb this, we think that we will be closer to 8 million, which means that there is a gap by 2020 of jobs that could be fulfilled, jobs that could be offered of not 1 million but 825,000, which is not negligible, and jobs which will be very well paid. So what we see is that by 2020 we will realize 660,000 jobs, but there is on top of that a potential of 825 that could be made. So in a situation when you have still high level of unemployment, especially among young people, I mean, that's something that people should reflect. And especially when I show you the dynamic of the transformation of the workforce, that's very important that people understand where they can seize these jobs. Okay, so what we have done at the European level, when we saw this decrease of people entering computer science studies, and at the same time the growth in the demand, we realized that something needs to be done. So we issued a communication in 2007, e-skills for the 21st century. But because of the inertia, I mean, it took time before we could start to convince member states to act on this. So we have been monitoring the supply and demand, developing foresight scenario. We have seen some of the results. We have developed, by the way, 28 country analyses. So there is a detailed analysis for Spain, and you are very much invited. This has been released last year to have a look and to comment on this and see how you can also enrich this for the future. So we have benchmarked member states' policy initiative, and we are also now proposing to develop a European framework for ICT professionalism with, as Juan Pablo said, with the European standardization body, CEN. And there are different elements here. The first one is we develop a European e-competence framework. Now it's the version 3.0, and it will become a European standard, European norm next year. And we have developed related job profile definition. So when I mean 3.0, it meant that by 2008 we came already with the 1.0. So it doesn't mean, of course, when we come with something that is cast in stone and will never change. On the contrary, it's something which is a reference framework, a proposal, where member states should adopt, depending, of course, on their circumstances and depending on their priorities and activities. We have developed this year, so it has been released this year, a European foundational ICT body of knowledge, and we are working on curriculum development guidelines. Again, this is here the 1.0. So it's not perfect, but that has been the result of the work of experts and consensus, and it's there for further improvement and maintenance because these things need to be scalable and sustainable. We have also worked on quality label for ICT industry training and certification, the training which are provided by the Cisco, the Microsoft, the IBM, the SAP, etc. They are of growing importance because these are the people who can train the people who are in the workforce for the coming years. We have been working on what we call e-leadership skills, so the skills for the top players, the red box that we were talking about, and key enabling technology skills, and also entrepreneurship. We have established a grand coalition for digital jobs. I know that in Spain there is also a discussion about coalition. 8 countries have decided to launch national coalition, and we are working on the e-skills for job campaign. We were talking about the Declaration of Riga. It was launched on the 13th of March. So the e-competence framework 3.0 is here. Please have a look. You will see this in detail. It's, by the way, it's translated in foreign languages. And in 2016, we will start working on the 4.0. So we will, of course, very much invite you to contribute and make suggestions. This is a reference framework, which is a shared tool to help discussion between the different stakeholders. Industry, human resource managers, employers, those who are providing training and certification, and also, of course, academia. So again, it's a tool to help building platform and building a single reference tool at the pan-European level. And that's also a tool that we use to discuss with Japan, with the US, with Australia, with India, because they are also confronted with the same issue and they are developing also the same type of approach. So these are, again, the 4 building blocks I was talking about. So here we have something, we have reached already the version 3.0. Here we have released just the first version. Here we have been working last year on providing first version of quality criteria for recognition of industry-based training. This is something that we will start working by this summer. So there will be this will be the new part. And the goal is by 2016 to come with a comprehensive European framework for the ICT profession, bringing together these 4 building blocks. So you see them again. And this will be interfaced with and aligned with the European qualification framework, the national competence framework, and bring a bridge between what we call this certification, qualification, and the certification and non-formal and informal learning, which is provided mostly by industry. And here you see the need, of course, with the key users here to develop good governance mechanism to ensure that there is a good maintenance and good upgrade of this solution. So, but next year we'll come with a complete proposal for a comprehensive framework for ICT professionalism. This will not be something that will be mandatory, this will be voluntary, but this is something that we will present to member states and to stakeholders to get their adoption and support. Okay, was just to refer to this industry-based training and certification. This is the report which has been developed here. All this has been mapped to the e-competence framework, and there are big companies like Cisco, Microsoft, IBM, who have mapped their training education system with the e-competence framework. And this is the most recent development we were talking about, so the Riga Declaration. Riga Declaration has been adopted by over 80 stakeholders. With the eSkills for Job campaign, we have over 300 stakeholders, so there is a strong dynamism to push for this issue. And in the Riga Declaration, you have especially particular among the 10 principles, something that just calls for this maturation of the IT profession and coming together in Europe with a comprehensive framework for the ICT profession. So I invite you very much to look about the website and also to look at the Riga Declaration and the press release that has been issued by the Latvian presidency. However, this is not the end of the story, because there have been also very important recent development. The European Commission, as you know, and President Juncker made proposals for the development of a digital European single market. So we have been working on this now for several months, and by the beginning of May, the idea is to come with a single digital market package to propose measures to implement it, and they will be specifically referenced to digital skills. Not only digital skills for the topic I was talking about, ICT professionalism, but also to increase the knowledge and the experience of young people. So there will be reference to introducing coding to primary and secondary education to young people, to promote ICT education also to a growing percentage of students, but also how we need to adapt the workforce. So here, not just the workforce who are working in IT, not just the IT specialists, but also the workforce at large. because what I was talking about, the impact and the dynamics within the IT workforce, we are seeing the same trends. And there have been studies by Oxford that say that for the next 15 to 20 years, up to 47% of the occupation may be affected or may disappear because of artificial intelligence, automation, and innovation. So we have to reflect on how we should equip our workforce to deal with this challenge if we want to make sure that Europe remain a place where competitiveness, jobs, and growth can be sustained. Thank you very much. Let's try. So it works. Okay, I mean, it's a topic that has always been there because more broadly speaking, for science, technology, engineering, this is the same issue. However, the situation has somewhat improved in engineering, but remains quite dramatic in the field of IT. And there were even statistics that show that in the 80s, the percentage of women joining IT was much bigger. One of the reasons is, of course, the fact that there is not much exposure to young people when they are 14, 15 and making choice of careers. And this is quite dramatic because, of course, if you don't choose to take technology and IT at this age, it's very unlikely that you take it at a later stage. And what we have seen is there are also trends like in business schools, especially in France. HEC is the most famous business school in France, but now they have a kind of sexist motto saying that we are on top of that the only one which has more boys than girls. Because most business schools in France now, they are mostly populated by girls. So we have this kind of polarization. If you look about education, teachers, in France 65% of the teachers are female. But if you look the teachers who are below 35 years of age, so the teachers who have been recruited recently, over 80% are female. So there are professions which are becoming very, very polarized when it comes to gender. So there have been, of course, a lot of association and effort being made in the member states, also in Europe, to try to promote a better image of IT for girls, etc. But that remains quite low. The other disturbing thing is, as you know, it's not because you have studied in the field that you will be in the field. So we know also that there are many people who are studying IT and then they decide to go to finance or elsewhere. But in the case of women, it happens that those who are having degrees in IT, then they choose to go elsewhere in a larger proportion. So I believe there is certainly something to be done regarding working conditions to facilitate the need of women to have more responsibility, also more flexible ways of working. And in the future, it may well be that also the possibility to work from home or on the move will help to increase the number of women in IT. But it's not just to Europe. In the US also, there were statistics that were showing that it's not just, by the way, women, it's also minorities. If you look at the US, white and Asian majority is overwhelmingly in the IT sector, 90%. When you look about women and people of color, you have a big problem. So there is a need to work at the education level at a much lower age to make sure that they understand the possibilities, the potential which are there for them. And I think we need a much better balance between boys and girls in IT education.
Thank you, Mr. Richier. Continuamos con la siguiente ponencia. Por favor, Chema, si subes, te conectas. de Riga, que fue precisamente el mes pasado, en marzo. I pass to lead you to the opening of this Congress to Mr. André Richier, and we began after with the first presentation.
Perdón.
Okay, so you can hear me? Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to present you the effort of the European Commission to promote ICT professionalism. Because as you know,
representante de la Comisión Europea, que va a hacer la apertura. En principio estaba previsto que la apertura la hiciera el Secretario de Estado de Telecomunicaciones y Sociedad de la Información, pero bueno, por tema de agenda va a hacer la clausura al final de la mañana. Por lo tanto, corresponderá a nuestro primer ponente, que también voy a aprovechar ya para presentarlo, el señor André Richier, la realización de esta apertura. André Richier viene como representación de la Dirección General de Mercado Interior, Industria, Emprendimiento y Pequeña y Mediana Empresa, en la que se están desarrollando.
Profession is becoming especially important is we see that IT now is increasingly pervasive. It's in all technologies. Now, if you look about a car, there is an awful lot of software and IT component in a car. And now there are even people who are worried that hackers can decide to steer the wheel against their decision and may provoke accident. And there is also this whole threat that data could be stolen from the driver and be used for whatever purpose, for commercial reason and whatsoever. So there is a real concern about the pervasiveness of IT and the risk that it may cause for society. And
importantísimos proyectos en el ámbito de las tecnologías de la información y las comunicaciones, como son la mayor parte de la estrategia e-skills o los proyectos de e-competencies for professionalism que habrán seguro escuchado, y que está ahora en proceso de normalización en la Organización Europea de Normalización, el CEN, y cuyo quizá los últimos logros serían la presentación del ICT Body of Knowledge, que se realizó en febrero, y la declaración.
ICT is currently not a regulated profession. There is still plenty of people who work as ICT practitioners who never got any degree in ICT. Depending on the country, it can be between 50 or 70%. So, which means that the demand has always been very high, and the supply has always been much lower than the demand, which means that a lot of people who could not find jobs, although they had already degrees in mathematics, in engineering, or in biotechnology or whatsoever, decide to work. There are also people who worked with a much lower level and still find opportunities for jobs. So we will see that this issue of maturing the